The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Yeah, there's no getting around it. We're in the dog days here. But 10 days from today, rookies report to training camp. And then 5 days later, the veterans come in, and the NFL gets back to dominating the news again. A couple of NFL things to deal with today. We did have the All-Star backups, and the pitcher selected yesterday, CJ Abrams, is a backup. And we'll talk about his rise and what has happened since the Juan Soto trade. It's only been a week since James Wood came up, but it looks like he is here to stay. We may be saying something different a couple of months from now, but so far, so good. Hit his first home run over the weekend, a couple of more walks yesterday, another hit. I mean, you got to credit Mike Rizzo for what he did in a bad situation. I mean, nobody wanted to see Juan Soto go. But if you had to deal him, looks like they dealt him for the right prospects, for the right guys. And, you know, there's a couple of prospects still down in the minors from that deal. It's a 5-player trade. Mackenzie Gore, solid starter. James Wood, so far so very good. And CJ Abrams, at the age of 23, is an all-star. I mean, that's pretty good stuff. And Rizzo talked to Buster Olney last week on his podcast. If you missed it on Friday, I'm going to play that again in about 20 minutes, and he does a very good job of explaining what their strategy is, how they're carrying it out, and no, they're probably not going to be a playoff team this year. They're 6 games under 500. They're 5 out of a wild card, bunch of teams in front of them, and younger players do tend to wear down at the end of the season because they're not used to making the run with veteran guys who know how to pace themselves and things like that. But, you know, by and large, you'd have to say, on that deal, given that it was an impossible situation, dealing one of the best players in baseball, that the return they got, and when you're talking about prospects, it's always a gamble. The jump from the minors to the majors is a big, big leap, and not everybody's able to make it. But so far, so good on a couple of the young guys. And, again, Mike Rizzo, all the credit in the world. So, yesterday, the Nationals lost. They lost to the Cardinals 8-3. They got another game today as they finish up the series. And it wasn't, I think, until about 6 o'clock. Maybe it was earlier than that. Maybe teams got notification on this. But in the clubhouse after the game, this is how Davey Martinez informed the team that CJ Abrams is going to go to Texas a week from tomorrow.
I got an announcement to make. We have an All-Star for 2024, CJ Abrams.
I love everybody in here. No, I'm grateful for everybody in this room. Without y'all, I wouldn't be able to do it. So I'm ready to represent the best team in the world. Yeah. So, thank you. Thank everybody.
He made a call to his father, according to what Spencer Nussbaum has in the Post today, and he said, my whole life, I mean, me and my dad putting in the work since I was a little kid, his voice breaking. He was excited, probably more than me. We're going to keep going, though. It's just the first one, right? He's 23 years old. He's played 277 games for the Nationals, and it's noted in the story that a real turning point was exactly a year ago, July 7th, 2023, when he was put in the leadoff spot. And he's got 14 steals. He also has 14 home runs. You got to have power to be in the leadoff spot now. So he's got everything going. He's made some errors this year, 7 of them, and he's probably going to get better as a fielder. I remember when Ian Desmond came up, he was kind of a butcher in the field and became a very good shortstop. So he's going to improve on that, I think. But he's got all the things that you want, the speed, the power, and the ability to be able to handle the big jump here. I mean, you know, a lot of guys don't make the jump as well as he did, and he's been able to do it. Now, one thing that caught me from this story about Abrams being in the All-Star game, he admitted that when he was younger, he preferred to watch the home run derby rather than the All-Star game. And to me, as someone who's, watched All-Star games since the 1960s, I was at the one here 55 years ago at RFK Stadium in July of 1969. I look at it a little bit differently, obviously, than he does. They didn't have the home run derby then. It was all about the game, and it was all about, prior to the days of interleague play, seeing players from the National League play at RFK Stadium. That was a big, big deal. That no longer is, because we have interleague play every night. Ho-hum, the Cubs are coming to Camden Yards tomorrow night. So what? That's the way baseball is now. It's all about interleague, and sooner or later we may even just do away with the leagues completely and just reshuffle everybody and put them in divisions that make sense. But the reality is he's a young guy who grew up knowing he wanted to play baseball, and the All-Star game didn't hold much interest for him. And what they've done to it is just ridiculous. I mean, they tried for a while where they made it competitive, where if the winning team, they would get the home field advantage in the World Series. That went by the wayside. You used to have players who played the whole game. The famous one in 1970 where Pete Rose barrels over Ray Fosse. It's the 13th inning, and Pete Rose is still in the game. These guys play 1 or 2 innings, and they're out. And pitchers pitch 1 inning max. It's a lot different than it used to be. And, clearly for a younger generation guy like that, it's not that intriguing anymore. And another thing, if you haven't looked this up, you'll see it for sure a week from tomorrow. They've gone to these ridiculous-looking softball-like uniforms, like the undershirt look with the sleeves and the whole thing. And the National League players are going to wear the same thing. American League, it's a bad idea. I used to love to see the different uniforms, and the home field team would wear the white ones, and the visiting team would wear the grays. And just looking at the way the field laid out, you'd see a different player in a different uniform at every spot. And sometimes, like the Phillies have got 7 guys this year. Sometimes you look at, wow, look at all the players from the Yankees that are out there, or, the Red Sox, or whatever it was. And we don't have that anymore. We even had this really cool thing, which wouldn't happen today, which happened in 1985. The Tigers had a great second baseman named Lou Whitaker. He and Alan Trammell were together forever. Trammell played shortstop. Whitaker played second base. They were always in the All-Star game together, and they made it in 1985. The problem for Whitaker was he was kind of a forgetful guy. So the game is played at the now torn-down Minneapolis Metrodome, and Lou showed up without his jersey. He realized he made a mistake, and I don't know why, he said this, but he said, "I left my bag in the back seat of my Mercedes. Isn't that a shame?" He was saying kind of sarcastically, thinking he wouldn't have to play in the game. I don't know why he said Mercedes. That's not really a good look. Even then, a car like that, when most cars were selling for under $10,000, that was like a $40,000 car. But, so he said it that way. He said, "I left the bag in the back seat of my Mercedes." And didn't have much time to go, so they scramble around. I guess he reported on Tuesday. He didn't show up the day before for the workout. Shows up on Tuesday for the game, and he doesn't have his spikes. He doesn't have his gloves, batting helmet, hat. He did pack his socks and his uniform pants. So he got some help from his teammates. Bert Blyleven let him wear his helmet. Cal Ripken brought along an extra glove. Cal was always prepared. Damaso Garcia of the Blue Jays came through with batting gloves. And then there was the problem of the cap and the jersey. So, believe it or not, they went to the souvenir stand at the Metrodome. I guess they were stocking these things for the All-Star game. They had a generic Tigers jersey with no name or number on the back. So a clubhouse attendant took a black marker and wrote number 1, which was Whitaker's number. Good thing it wasn't like 88, which would have taken forever to draw. But he's able to draw 1 with a black magic marker on the back of the uniform. And he had the adjustable, cap, the Tigers replica cap. He wore that. And he went out and he went 0 for 2, but he handled plays in the field, played 6 innings, and was taken out. Well, that wasn't the end of it, because the Smithsonian thought that was really cool. So they took the replica jersey that he had with the stenciled in number 1 on the back, and it's now in the Smithsonian collection. I have been to the American Museum of American History. That is my favorite museum. I haven't seen it there, but they have a lot of things that they keep in storage and put it out from time to time. So, there's that kind of story, which we don't get anymore because everything is given to them, new jerseys, new uniforms. It's all about selling product. And that wasn't the case in 1985. But congratulations to CJ Abrams for making the All-Star team. That's a cool thing. Again, we are in the football doldrums here, but I don't want to call this manufactured news because Eric Flack of Channel 9 has done a great job of covering the stadium story, all the ins and outs of that. He did a great job of covering Ted Leonsis' failed romance with the state of Virginia and how that all went down. So he's really on top of these things. But he brought up something the other day which, probably in the big scheme of things is not that big of a deal. But the question of what happens if the Commanders go to Washington or even Virginia, which is the longest of long shots. It looks like they're not going to wind up there. But let's say they make a deal with RFK. What happens to the FedEx Field site? That's not owned by the state of Maryland. That's owned by the Commanders. So this was a look a couple of days ago on Channel 9 as he looked at where that stands and what it might mean for the site in PG County if, in fact, the Commanders leave.
Outside Commanders Field in Prince George's County, there is uncertainty about what the future holds, even for Cowboys fan and Bowie resident Kevin Sales.
If you take the sporting event away, what would you have here?
The team's search for a new stadium includes three options: the current site, a site in Loudoun County, Virginia, and the nostalgic favorite of many fans, the RFK site in D.C. But for that to happen, legislation giving D.C. long-term control of the federal land RFK sits on needs to pass the Senate. And right now, both of Maryland's senators are signaling potential opposition to the bill, largely over concerns about what would happen to the stadium site in Prince George's County if the Commanders decide to leave. Because it's the team, not the county or state, that owns the stadium and the 200 acres of land it sits on. In a statement to WUSA 9, Senator Ben Cardin said of the RFK bill, whatever the future holds, there must be binding agreements as to the future of the current stadium property should the Commanders decide to move. The office of Senator Chris Van Hollen agreed and said he wants to, quote, prevent actions that unfairly tilt the scales in favor of one location over another at the expense of federal taxpayers. In a statement, a Commander spokesperson told us they remain committed partners with Prince George's County. A person close to the stadium decision adding, it is just too early in the process to discuss conversations, plans, or hypothetical scenarios. But a hypothetical move is being discussed by people around the current stadium.
Just to let it just sit here and just do anything, I don't think that'll be good for the county, and people wouldn't like taxpayers, I don't think they'll like that.
A spokesperson for County Executive Angela Alsobrooks telling WUSA 9, even if the Commanders choose to relocate, they will still be Prince George's County property owners. We trust that they won't turn their backs on the community they've called home for almost 30 years. Keep in mind, even if the Commanders decide to go elsewhere, we are still years away from a move. The agreement the team signed with the county and the state commits them to play here through 2027. But again, they own all this, so they can stay as long as they need to. And without a site even selected yet, we could be looking at 2030 before the team is in a new stadium, no matter where it is.
And it could be even later than that. Eric Flack of Channel 9 with that report. Yeah, I mean, once they break ground, it's 3 years. So, even if they break ground tomorrow, we're looking at maybe the 2027 season, maybe. But this thing is, moving along slowly. Opposition from state senators. The only other thing I would say about what the team might do, they're responsible adults. This isn't Dan Snyder ownership. And they're two guys from Maryland. Yeah, it's Montgomery County. Josh Harris and Mitch Rales, the two principal owners. They both grew up in Montgomery County, but they're Maryland, were residents growing up, and I think they would not leave that as a mess. I don't know what you do with it. It's a lot of land. The only other thought I have is if they wind up in the district, could they possibly leave Ashburn and maybe set up their training facility there. I think it's more likely they're going to stay in Ashburn and they're going to refurbish that. And by and large, the players live there. I think George Stark might be the last guy to live in Washington, D.C. and play for the team. So I don't think they would turn that into a training complex, but they could. And they have the land to do it. They've also got the land out in Ashburn as well. So, yeah, I mean, there's all these different things, but until they get a deal, until there's a deal in place to build, and most people, I think, want it on the RFK site, we're going to have this kind of speculation. Let me throw this in from the weekend. I'm sure you heard about this. There was terrible, terrible tragedy. Also, it was in PG County. And it's one of those things where because we've had so many terrible accidents, especially with NFL players, with alcohol and driving too fast. Henry Ruggs is serving a prison sentence as he was driving his Corvette over 100 miles an hour in Vegas and rammed into a woman from behind, killed her. Those stories are far too frequent. So you hear at 3 o'clock in the morning, 3 former teammates from Wise High School, all 3 of them played college football. The most notable, Khyree Jackson, who was drafted in the 4th round by Minnesota this past draft, all died in this horrible crash. And as it turns out, they were driving their Dodge Charger and then were struck in the side by an Xfinity Q50 that was changing lanes at a high rate of speed. We've been told that. What we don't know for sure is how much alcohol may have been involved in this. They do say that in the Post story that state police said investigators think that alcohol may have been a contributing circumstance in the crash. So far, no charges filed against the woman who was not injured, the woman driving the Xfinity or the Infinity, and so we don't know where that's going to go right now. But they're according to a report today, the investigation could take months before this happens, and it's such a sad story of all 3 of them for sure. And one of them played football at Maryland. Isaiah Hazel just finished his career. And the other one, Anthony Litton, he also played college football. Neither one of them so far had made it into the NFL. But Khyree Jackson, 4th round pick, and he was a really incredible story. He had gone to a couple of junior colleges, was working in a grocery store, was named Employee of the Month at Harris Teeter, and he said, quote, "I really wasn't thinking about football too much, but then, kind of got the itch and wound up playing at Alabama and at Oregon for a year, and was good enough to be drafted by the Vikings in the 4th round." Just an awful story, and your instinct, sadly, is to say, "Oh God, football players, 3 o'clock in the morning, out on the road, alcohol, driving." No. Apparently, they were innocent victims in this. Apparently, because it's going to take a while for the investigation to be complete. But what just a horrible, horrible thing, and we have these things far too often, and often it is the case that the ones who where the players are the ones who are guilty here, and here we have just victims, which is just an awful story. So we'll see where the investigation goes. Again, the woman so far has not been arrested, even though these reports were that she was drunk while driving the car. She had at least one other passenger in the car, also not injured. All right, coming up, we'll get to Mike Rizzo's conversation with Buster Olney on his podcast, how the Nationals have rebuilt since the Soto trade, and you've already got now one of the players that they got heading to the All-Star Game. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Next hour, we got LeBron James talking about the Bronny Summer League debut over the weekend. He missed last night, but did get to play in their first of their Summer League games, for whatever that's worth. And LeBron talks about, the criticism of the contract and all that. We'll get to that in the 10 o'clock hour. Tony's got a show today at 11 o'clock. I played this on Friday in the 10 o'clock hour, so I'm going to give it to you here. If you missed this or were not listening in the 10 o'clock hour, whatever your routine is on a daily basis, this was a lengthy conversation that Buster Olney had with Mike Rizzo on his podcast, and although it's several days old, it holds up because it speaks generally of what he has done. Now, it's only been 5 years since they won the World Series. But from that team, and this is how modern baseball works, from that team, even though they had some really good young players and a number of them still playing in the major leagues, they have one player left, the ineffective Patrick Corbin. Well, sometimes he's effective, but this will be his last year with the team, and if they're lucky, they'll be able to trade him at the deadline, and that will completely wash out everything that they had in place in 2019, except for the manager. Davey Martinez is still there, but only one player left from that team, and that's Corbin. And so Rizzo has a team that's, 6 games under 500, 5 out of the wild card. Likely won't be a postseason team this year, but we've just seen James Wood come up in the last week. Has played incredibly well. He's hitting .320. Looks like he's here to stay. And the rebuild that he has been able to do in that period of time, especially, they had to change course. It wasn't like, they won the World Series and they go, okay, we're all got to rebuild. Or the teardown that took place with the Marlins years ago because of money, where they won the World Series and then got rid of everybody. No, that hasn't happened. They had the misfortune of the pandemic in 2020. They only played 60 games that year. And then the following year, 2021, things began to fall apart to the point where they realized, okay, we're going to have to rebuild this team. So it's only really been a 2-year rebuild, maybe 2.5-year rebuild, and he's got this team where you can look at next year and certainly the year beyond that where they can be a contending team. So this was Rizzo explaining to Buster Olney how he's been able to put that together.
Our player development guys have done a great job of developing these guys in a relatively quick manner. We got Gore in a trade with the Padres, and we shut him down for the last couple of months of the season. When we first acquired him, worked with our pitching coaches and our analytical people and our pitch shape guys and our pitching lab and that type of thing, and has really emerged into a guy that we feel is going to be a really a front of the rotation type of guy. And then the emergence of Irvin and Parker and Hers, guys that are all young, all controllable, all have gone through our system, is a credit to the scouts for taking them and the player development guys for getting them to the next level. And they've pitched very, very, very well at the big league level. So that is something that when we see the evolution of our next championship caliber team, you could see those pieces all being important for us.
So, besides the fact that you're obviously very good at picking players, one of the things that sort of distinguishes your work, I think, is that you understand timing and putting teams together and putting groups of players together. Tell me about your thought process in that regard, because it does feel like, as you did with the championship team that won in 2019, you now have these guys all sort of moving forward together. How important that is?
I think it's important. I think that that aids in the chemistry aspect of the team at the big league level. When you're comfortable with guys and you've kind of grown with them through the trials and tribulations of taking the buses and staying at the lesser hotels and grinding through that minor league life, I think when you get to the big leagues, I think there's an appreciation and a camaraderie that you have that other teams teams that kind of mishmash guys in from the free agency and trades and that type of thing, and don't have that chemistry between the guys. I think it's important. I think chemistry plays a part in separating the good from the great and the great from the championship clubs. And I think that we've kind of we've concentrated on that aspect along with the other tangible aspects of roster building.
One of the guys you promoted in the last few days, James Wood. Tell me about the first time you laid eyes on him and what jumped out at first time you saw him play.
I think the first thing that jumps out to everybody is the size of the player. On camera, on video, it just doesn't do it justice. You know what I mean? This is a big man that moves well, moves quickly, moves with agility and grace, and has scary athletic abilities. I just recently had seen a kind of a montage of his high school basketball career, and it was impressive. I mean, windmill dunks, alley oops, and it was something to see, and to think that translates into the game of baseball, where these long limb kind of players are kind of few and far between in our game, and you see him having the success that he has is kind of a real throwback to some of the generations of those big the Winfields of the world in the past.
It's interesting. His first hit in the big leagues, the smoothness of his swing for someone that big, to me is unusual. Is there a comp for you when you look at him and how he moves and you say, yeah, that guy reminds me of so-and-so?
I hate throwing comps on guys because it's on record forever. You know what I mean? He's got a smooth stroke of like a John Olerud had in the past. He's got the size of a Judge in a Winfield. He's got speed and agility. That's hard to put a comp on. I think his comp is a limitless ceiling. I think we're going to be comping players to James Wood in the near future.
CJ Abrams, a player, has taken a big step forward. When you first began to have conversations with the Padres about that Juan Soto trade, tell me what your thoughts were about him as an offensive player, because it feels like he's just growing in leaps and bounds in front of our eyes.
He's taken a large step in his offensive game, in the totality of his game, really, but especially on the offensive side. He was a guy that we identified as one of the must-haves in that deal. We thought that even after that injury that he had in the minor leagues there with the kind of the bad broken ankle, that he still moved really well. He's kind of an elite runner and plays a premium position, and we really thought the bat was going to be special, and he was one guy that was really difficult for the Padres to part with, obviously. But the steps that he's made at the big league level, with very little minor league experience with us in AAA, that the job he's done with Darnell Coles this season, throughout this season, and Chris Johnson, they've done a great job with the escalation of his pitch selection and that type of thing. I mean, he's got the whip, he's got the flick, he's got the hands with the bat that everyone likes to see with these hitters. He's got a powerful swing, and although he's wiry strong, he can hit the ball a mile, and I think that he's kind of he's trying to learn that to hit his pitch and not chase, and I think he's getting better and better at that. I think even over the last couple of weeks, he's really taken more walks than he ever has before, and getting better pitches to hit, and when he hits them, they stay hit and they go a long way, and he's just learning kind of the nuances of using the entire field and thinking along with the pitchers, and I think that's all a credit to Davey and his staff, kind of teaching them and developing them really at the big league level.
Mike, I've had conversations with Billy Bean and others in the past, and they talk about your style of making trades. Their perception of you is that you will look at an organization or group of players, a group of prospects in an organization, and say, you know what, I think that's the team that I most want to make the deal with. Can you sort of walk us back through when you were looking at the possibility of a Juan Soto deal and how quickly you settled on the Padres as potentially a really good trade partner for you?
I think my staff and myself, I think we do a good job of identifying fits. Where does this player fit best, and who would be most who is he most attractive to? And I think we kind of settle in on a handful of teams, and with the Soto deal, that we made it known that he was an available player, but at our price, and I think that we set the bar high, and there was a handful of teams that that kind of played in that realm for a while, but it really only got down to a couple of teams that were serious enough that would that would give us the prospect capital that we needed to make the trade. And we found that the Padres were a team that sort of fit with most, with where they were in their progression as trying to build a championship team, and had some good conversations with AJ, and he had the guts enough to pull the trigger and make the trade.
Yeah, as you know, AJ also has a reputation of being aggressive. What were those conversations like, and how quickly did they move? In other words, did you guys immediately settle on a core group when in your conversations, or was there extensive haggling? Because there is in the industry, is in my time covering the sport, as time has gone on, general managers will talk about how some teams have this really laborious process. It feels like you and AJ might be two people who would say, you know what, let's get this done, let's move.
Yeah, our process was not laborious. It was kind of direct and kind of we shot our arrow to the target, and it was kind of we were at a position because it was Juan Soto that we were moving. We needed this package of players to make this deal, and we understood fully if you don't want to meet the package, that's no issue either. We'll just keep Juan and move on from there. But it was I think for such a impactful trade for both sides, I think it went relatively quickly and smoothly, and you had two partners that kind of spoke the same language, and it's always a respectful conversation between me and the other GMs, and they kind of know what I want and what we're gonna accept, and no problem if we don't get to that point, we just move on.
And with the younger general managers, there's some thought among the older general managers, those guys prefer to text. Tell me about you. What's your preference in terms of communicating? Do you like text? Do you like having conversations? How do you like that to go?
I think that the beginning of these processes is done, in my case at least, by our assistant GMs. Mostly, we kind of build foundations, build interest level bases, and that type of thing. And as it gets to the general manager portion of it, when we're getting closer to make a deal, there are some texts going out. But when it gets close to a deal, I have to talk to somebody and to get their feelings, and so they can hear where I'm coming from and my rationale for making this ask, and that type of thing. I think that's important for the other GM to know what I'm thinking and why I would only do player X instead of player Y and X, and my rationale for it. I think it keeps it respectful. I think I'm a guy who kind of lays all my cards on the table, and here's the deal, and let's make it or let's move on.
Last one for you, where do you think you are now in your process as you bring the Nationals back from that championship team in 2019?
I think we're moving forward. It's been since the trade deadline, since we started this rebuild, and the deadline of 21, we've moved a lot of great players, a lot of Hall of Fame players, that we had, and it's been a rough go. Nobody likes to rebuild. No manager wants to rebuild. No general manager wants to rebuild. No owner wants to rebuild, because they're painstaking years of failure and losing. But you have to stay true to the process. You have to look at the goal that you're trying to attain, and that's championship quality play for an extended period of time. Now, when we rebuilt the first time, it took us 3 years of losing a lot of games to get the roster to the way we wanted it, and we went on an 8-year run of being a really, really good team that culminated in 4 division titles, a wild card, and a world championship. So we felt that rebuild was worth it. Now we have to prove to our fan base that this rebuild is going to be worth it. So since 2021, it's been painful. We do see the light at the end of the tunnel. I see a roster that we pitching is king. In my mind, starting pitching is king, and when you have 3, 4, 5, 6 young, controllable starting pitchers. That's a good start. We've got some good core pieces already in the big leagues that'll help us up the middle. We've got a terrific defensive center fielder, shortstop and second baseman that are 23 years old, and a catcher, Ruiz, that we think is going to get better and better. He's having a rough first half this year, but we think that he's our catcher of the future. And then with our minor league system, we've got our impact big league players are mostly still in the upper minor leagues, but we see those guys transitioning with the Woods and the Cruz and the Houses and Cavelli coming back off the Tommy John. We see bright things ahead. We'll have payroll flexibility. And I think that we've proven in the past that when you get your good core group of young, controllable players, and you supplement them with some good veteran guys that can not only perform for you but lead, I think that's a recipe for success and a continuous championship caliber run that the fans in DC will be proud of.
So that's Nats GM Mike Rizzo with Buster Olney on his podcast, and towards the end there, he didn't say that this is going to mirror what they did in building the championship team in 2019, but he mentioned 3 years of extended losing. As I laid out before we played this, they're probably in year 3 of that right now because, again, 2019, you win the World Series. Looks like you're going to be able to contend for a while, and they give Steven Strasburg the contract extension, which I know in the rearview mirror looks like a complete disaster, but at the time it made sense. He was not even 30 years old. He had just come off winning the World Series MVP. He had pitched a complete season, hadn't spent any time on the injured list. It looked like the right move. That, the pandemic, other issues began to add up, and you kind of throw away the 2020 season where you only play 60 games. Then you come back in 2021 thinking, okay, even Ryan Zimmerman's come back for that year. And you think, maybe you got a shot to be in it. Well, it was pretty clear that wasn't going to happen. So you look at the 3 years of rebuilding, 2022, 2023, we're in 2024, and maybe in 2025, you got a team that's got a shot. Remember, the World Series team, they were oh so close to getting eliminated in that wild card game. They had that one game with Milwaukee. They're behind. Josh Hader, the unhittable closer, comes in for the Brewers. Juan Soto delivers the big, turned out to be a double, and he got caught at third base, but that's what turned the tide. That drove in the winning runs. They go on to win that, and then they go on, they play St. Louis and I guess the Dodgers and whatever. They managed to get to the World Series off of what looked like a hopeless situation and a one-and-done circumstance. And now they don't do that anymore. It's best of 3. But if you just get in, and we've seen it happen, teams that just get there, and then, ultimately you probably have to have the really good players, and I think Texas proved that last year. They had a big payroll and they won. But it's getting in, and this probably isn't the year, and they're probably going to be sellers at the deadline at the end of the month. But come 2025, that timeline of 3 years of rebuilding and extended losses looks like it's going to make sense. And he did, also you want extended success, which is what they had. It started in the 2012 season under Davey and extended all the way through 2019. So that's 8 years of extended success. And even in 2011, they were getting to be a better team. They had won, I think, like 10 of 11 or something like that when that wacky Jim Riggleman resigned, like in June, saying that if you're not going to give me a contract extension, I'm leaving. He left. They bring in Davey, and Davey had a team that didn't get there, didn't win the World Series, but was consistently winning divisions and set them on a track so that in 2019, Davey Martinez, not Davey Johnson, was able to win the World Series. Coming up, we will get to some sports writer stories. Also, LeBron James talks to Dave McMenamin about the debut of his kid. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. I got a couple of cool sports writer stories coming up this hour. Podcast done about the glory days of the Boston Globe. And at one time, they probably had the best sports section in the country with legendary writers like Peter Gammons and Will McDonough on football. Bob Ryan still writes occasionally. Dan Shaughnessy still working there. Shaughnessy and Ryan talking about those days and behind-the-scenes stories. Shaughnessy actually has some history in Washington. Worked for the Star, covered the Baltimore Orioles for a period of time. So we'll get to that this hour. Tony's got a show, speaking of old-time sports writers. He's got a show coming up at 11 o'clock today. And we're going to roll into some basketball stuff here. A couple of stories that, I don't know, were created but made by ESPN over the weekend that may have not been on your radar. Steph Curry had a conversation about the departure of his longtime teammate, Klay Thompson, going to the Dallas Mavericks, talking to Malika Andrews. And he makes a point about the dynasty that is probably come to an end here. It seems likely that Steph Curry will end his career kind of the same way that Kobe Bryant did with the Lakers. Generational players, great players, multiple championships, Hall of Fame, the whole thing. And Kobe's teams weren't very good at the end. And he wound up playing 20 years in the NBA and went out with a bang, 60 points in his last game. But it was his last game because they weren't going to go to the playoffs. And Curry has been a part of a team that for a decade has been in the conversation for championships because of the big three with Klay and Draymond Green. And in talking to Malika Andrews, he said this. He says, people thought it was over in 2019. That's when they won their third title. But 2022 was an amazing championship because we defied the odds. That's 11 years, almost 12 years of championship relevancy built around a certain core. He says, I don't think it will be replaced because it's just hard to keep things together in this league. Well, he's right about that. He's absolutely right about that. Also, you got to realize that, Curry was the 7th pick of the draft and Klay was the 11th. And at the beginning, when they were under team control, their contracts were relatively reasonable. That helped. They got Draymond in the second round. So really, you wind up with 3 core players taken in draft positions that you just don't expect to build a big three with, but they were able to do it. I do think, though, it's possible that there will be a team that will win 4 championships, maybe in a more compressed period of time, but with the same core. And I look at the San Antonio Spurs, and if Victor Wembanyama is that guy, if he's the generational player that we've seen in the past, whether it was Magic or Bird or Michael Jordan, if he's on that level, I could see the Spurs winning 4 championships over maybe a shorter period of time because it is so hard to keep 3 guys together, but they could win 4 maybe in 6 years. And David Dupree, a longtime writer with the Washington Post and also with USA Today, covered the NBA most of his career. He said to me once, he says, look, more times than not, the team with the best player is going to win the championship. So if Wembanyama is that guy, I could see the Spurs doing that. I could see that entirely possible. But over an 11, 12-year period, winning 4 with the same core, no, I don't think that's going to happen. It just, and especially, you got to realize this, when the big three came together, we didn't have the decision yet, right? LeBron, let's see, Curry was in the league by 2009, so like a year before, but that was a game changer too, where guys, certainly in the last 10 years, have been able to decide where they want to go and who they want to come with them. And that really wasn't the case at the beginning of this dynasty, and they wanted to stay together because they were winning championships and probably should have had a 5th. And if Draymond doesn't kick LeBron and the fellas during that 2016 championship for Cleveland, I think Golden State wins that series in 6, and they might have that 5th championship, and maybe LeBron never fulfills the promise to Cleveland. He went back to deliver a championship, did it, and then went on to the Lakers. Curry's got 2 years left on his contract. And he said he plans to finish his career with the only team that he's ever known. He said, being in one place for my own career, it's like a broken record, I know, but it's really hard. I want to be greedy and say we can be relevant and in the mix and give ourselves a realistic chance to win while I'm still growing these gray hairs and doing high school visits for my daughter. It's crazy. It's just the nature of where I'm at. But yes, all that I say is I love the Bay Area. Bay Area's home, and I never want to change. I understand that. So, it's probably over for him. He's kind of acknowledging that. But his point that we won't see this type of dynasty again, I'm not sure. I think we could see it just in a compressed period of time. And you look at what Michael Jordan did in his run when we didn't have the ability of stars to jump onto other teams and win championships the way we do today. He won 6 of them over 8 years. He missed one entire season because he was playing baseball. And when he came back in the second year, he didn't get there till April. So, realistically, it would have been possible for them to win 8 straight. And then you're talking about comparisons to what the Celtics did in a much different era when they won with Bill Russell 11 of 13 and 8 straight. On to LeBron. LeBron also talking to ESPN over the weekend off the Bronny debut as Bronny is now playing for their summer league team. I think he went 4 for 15 in his first game, and in their second game last night against Golden State, he sat out with what they're calling a knee injury. I don't know how serious it is, but LeBron is now working out with Team USA, getting ready for the Olympics. He's in Vegas. He's also signed a contract extension. It's less than the max, left $3 million on the table in order to help the Lakers avoid what they call the second apron. They have different, what they call aprons levels for luxury tax, so they don't have to pay as much. And this was Dave McMenamin talking to LeBron about the debut of Bronny and where his career stands as he's now approaching 40.
We're going to have a chance to talk about some history in the fall.
With the 55th pick in the 2024 NBA Draft, the Los Angeles Lakers select Bronny James.
LeBron James and Bronny James will not only be the first teammates to be father-son duo in league history. It's the first time it's ever happened, period. Just take me back to New York. What was that moment like for you?
It was very emotional. It was very emotional to hear. That's been his dream for quite a while. He says he wants to play in the NBA, and then he had an opportunity to talk to his agent, Rich Paul, and Rich asked him what is his ultimate goal in this whole thing. He said, I just want to hear my name called. And for it to happen, with us all being together and him being able to hear his name called in the NBA draft, is like a moment that we will never, ever forget.
Between the lines, to some extent, basketball is going to take care of itself.
Yeah, for sure.
But outside of those lines, he's starting to have some of the same arrows slung at him that you had when you were a teenager. What's going to take for him to withstand that?
I don't know if people really understand Bronny. He doesn't care. I actually cared a little bit when I came in. I wanted people to like me, and some of the things that people were saying about me, it kind of bothered me early on in my career. I let it get to me. Bronny doesn't give a He doesn't. Bronny plays, he works his tail off. When he's done, he goes home and plays a video game. He does not care about nobody. He doesn't even listen to that stuff. He's like the complete opposite of his dad. His dad will say something.
Yeah.
Bronny does not care. Like me personally, when I was coming up, I had no choice. I literally had no choice. I had to make it out. Like I had no choice. I had to make it out for me, my mom, my family. Bronny has all the choices in the world. So it's like a whole nother, people don't understand how hard that is and the commitment. For him to be coming out of heart surgery less than a year ago, for him to be able to be in the NBA, the kid is, he's special, but he doesn't care. It doesn't bother him.
We have breaking news. Just 6 days after drafting Bronny James, the Lakers have signed his father.
You signed a new contract with the Lakers. It potentially could take you through 23 seasons in the NBA, which is a pretty good number.
Yes, it is good. It's a great number.
Do you think this could be the last deal you ever signed as an NBA player?
I mean, it could be. I'm not gonna sit up here and say, maybe not. Yeah, it could be, easily. But we'll see what happens.
Rich Paul told me leading up to you signing that deal that you'd be willing to take a pay cut to sign an impact player. But here we sit, Klay Thompson's with the Dallas Mavericks, DeMar DeRozan's with the Sacramento Kings. What do you think happens?
It takes two to tango. I mean, at the end of the day, I think, our front office, our coaching staff, they try to do the job that they wanted to do or try to get guys to come, and it didn't happen. And that's okay. That's part of the business.
Since 2020, as the team had its ups and downs, we've had some private conversations about just how much winning still matters to you.
Yeah.
You have all the accolades. We talked about the stuff you've been able to earn through this game, but you still want to win. Can you do it here with the Lakers between now and the end of your career? Can it happen again?
Of course. Of course.
What gives you that confidence?
Because we've done it before.
And that's it. It's over. This historic 2020 NBA championship belongs to the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers conquer the bubble, and banner number 17 will soon hang in the rafters.
We still have two guys who commit every single day, and myself and AD, we commit to excellence and commit to winning. We're not that far off. We were 1 year removed from the Western Conference Finals. This past year didn't go as well as we would like, but we're not that far off. And there's so many teams in the league, so many great teams in the league, in the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference, but we don't see that we are that far off anyways.
Yeah, you're pretty far off. This is not going to be a team that wins. As far as what he says about this being Bronny's dream to play in the NBA, realistically, a guy who averaged less than 5 points a game needs to stay in college to achieve his dream in the NBA. It was just about being drafted. Yeah, this was the opportunity for that to happen. And as far as it being Bronny's dream, it's a dream that was planted in his head by Dad. Sure, he wanted to play in the NBA, but to play with Dad and the way it, coincidentally worked out, there he is at 55, and best player on the board for the Lakers, got to take him, give him a contract that's guaranteed. He's making like $7 million this year, which nobody at 55 besides him gets. So there's a little bit of playing with the facts there. But I kind of think it's cool. I'm fine with it. It's not going to happen again. And I'd like to see dad and son playing together. It's a one-off. It's not going to happen that often. So that's where he stands on that. And look, he's been a great player. There's never really been any off-the-court issues with him. Some took issue with the way he went to the Miami Heat with the decision. It was distasteful for some. But this really isn't. This isn't something that you look at and you go, oh my God, what a disgrace for the league. Yeah, it is nepotism. It's not fair, maybe, if you look at it in certain angles, but it's it's a guy who's done a lot for the league. He's taken the torch in many ways from Michael Jordan. Is he Michael Jordan? No, not in my opinion. Jordan's a better player, better winner, but he's somebody's been on the radar for a long time. Also, where he's comparing himself to Bronny and the pressure that he's facing, it's a totally different situation. LeBron James was on the cover of Sports Illustrated while he was still in high school. People knew about him for a long time just because he was LeBron James and that good. Even being LeBron James' son, people focused on Bronny, and then you had the other story, which LeBron talks about, where he had heart surgery. My God, I mean that story took an unbelievable turn in that he really died on the court. That happened. He died. Fortunately, they had a defibrillator and were able to save his life, and then had the surgery he needed to be able to continue his basketball career, which he did, and really only played about half a season. Only started about a dozen games at USC. So as far as that. The pressure that he faced, it was a totally different kind of thing. It was completely different than what LeBron faced. And when LeBron came out of high school, there was no one-and-done setup. You could go right to it, and nobody looked more ready to do it than LeBron. More ready than Kobe, more ready than Kevin Garnett, two guys who become stars in the NBA before LeBron ever got there. So there's really no comparison between the two. And, yeah, you could say basically Bronny grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth and didn't have to do all that and doesn't have. Sure, he's got generational wealth. The LeBron James family is going to be very, very wealthy for many, many generations to come. That's understood. But they're really, comparing himself to Bronny and saying that Bronny doesn't give an F, it's a lot different than when LeBron came in the league and the type of the pressure that he faced. And he did face pressure because some said, well, even Michael Jordan said this, and Jordan was LeBron's idol. There had been some contact when he was in high school, and he managed to get his phone number, and they used to talk from time to time. But even Michael Jordan said about LeBron coming in the league, he said, look, he's probably as physically mature as he's going to get. So what happens when he gets to the next level and he's been dominating at the high school level, he totally skips over college, and is that size going forward? What's that going to mean? What's that going to look like as far as his career develops? And it turned out he was a star right away. And I think in his second year, he got Cleveland to the finals based just on him, because the team wasn't very good, and then got his opportunity to win championships. So he's a fascinating person. We've never seen anybody this good in the NBA at that age, and you sign a contract which takes you through 23 years. The guys who have played that long didn't have it at the end. Kareem, I think, played 23, Robert Parrish, a handful of guys, but they were not nearly as dominant as he is at the age of 40. And, with the amount of money and care he takes with his body, spends like $2 million a year on it, maybe he's going to still be an effective player for 3 years. Maybe 3 years might actually happen, and at 43 walks away from the game, and maybe has set his son up that he's I don't think he's ever going to be a star, but might be a player who hangs around the league for a while. So we'll see. Coming up, where have you gone, Carson Wentz? We'll get to what he said over the weekend. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
We got Tony coming up at 11. I was debating whether to spend any time on this today, but I'm looking at Twitter, and the other stations are kind of flipping out about this. This Brandon Ayuk thing, which has been kind of bubbling, maybe above the surface, maybe a little below the surface, ever since he put out on TikTok some video where he was talking to Jaden Daniels. They are friends, and he said that the 49ers don't want him, and Daniels acted enthusiastically, and it was like, okay, they're going to make a deal and reunite Jaden Daniels and Brandon Ayuk in Washington. They're going to meet his salary demands. Everything's going to be great. Ayuk goes in to talk to ESPN on the Ryan Clark podcast about where he stands and who's with him. Jaden Daniels just hanging around. Well, over the weekend, Ayuk put up some practice video of the Commanders. And this is like going too far. This is attention-getting diva wide receiver stuff. And if he comes to Washington, which, again, I don't think is going to happen, it would have happened with the last ownership, no question about it, because they always pursued stars and news and flashy things. But if he were to come in, this would, I think, do damage to Terry McLaurin, who has been just a bright light in an organization that's been a disaster. He's everything that the diva wide receivers are not, a total mensch. And I think as time goes on, would you like to have Brandon Ayuk's talent here? Yeah, you would. But do you want everything that comes along with him? No, I don't think so. So I think as he makes more and more noise and he shows you more and more who he is, I think it's probably a good idea to move on from that thought. You never rule out the possibility that's going to happen, and the connection is pretty. The road here, let's put it that way, is pretty clear in that Adam Peters worked for the 49ers, so he knows what his salary structure is. He knows, what it would take to sign him into a deal. He knows the player, I'm sure, to some degree, knows the 49ers organization, knows what they would ask back for a player who's a bargain this year on the last year of a rookie deal at $14 million. But it's just not going to happen. And the more that Ayuk does, the more I think they've got to distance themselves from him more and more. And at some point, Jaden Daniels, he'll be asked about this, obviously, once they get the rookies in, which is only 10 days from today. But this is off season, whatever it was, this 3 or 4 week period, it's flying by. That's going to be one of the questions. What about Ayuk? And he's I think, got to distance himself from this nonsense that's going on with him right now. This is just the way that I would look at it. All right, Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz talking to ESPN over the weekend. He's now the backup quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs. And, that's a situation where, if all goes well for the Chiefs, he never sees the field. That this is Patrick Mahomes' team, or that they wrap up the championship and he plays the last game of this wrap up, I should say, home field throughout the playoffs, and he plays the last game of the regular season or something like that. But in talking to ESPN, he said he's going to support Mahomes as best he can. I would snarkily say the best way he can support Mahomes is to do kind of like what Mickey Mantle did in his dying days when he held a news conference and said to the youth of America, "Don't be like me." So maybe that's unfair, But Wentz, look at the movement that he's had. He at one time was the quarterback of the future for the Philadelphia Eagles, and they moved on from him at great expense to the Indianapolis Colts. It was only 2 years ago where Ron Rivera was telling anybody that listened, all these stories about Carson Wentz and how hated he is. Everybody on this team loves him. He plays golf, and the players hung out with him after the golf match and had a good time with him. He came over my house with his daughters, and I can tell you he's a good father. And turned out that he was not a bad teammate. He just was a bad player. And the disservice that Rivera did to his team by insisting on starting him against Cleveland when he was god-awful and probably cost him a chance to go to the playoffs. And then after the game, Rivera was informed that his team could be eliminated from the playoffs later that day if Green Bay won, and he said, "We can be eliminated?" That was just a complete embarrassing mess. But in talking about his relationship with Mahomes and what he expects, he says, "Pat and I have already had a great relationship that'll keep growing, and I'll keep finding ways I can help. I'll find a way to help him whatever I can, whether it's on the field or off the field, whatever." He signed with the Chiefs in the offseason. He's been with Philadelphia from 2016 to 2020, and even though he was hurt for that Super Bowl, that he was not the winning quarterback in that, they gave him a big contract, that a franchise quarterback would get. That didn't work out as he lost his job. So then he goes to the Colts. He does a terrible job in the final game of the season against a bad team from Jacksonville. They missed the playoffs. They trade him here for draft picks, because they were going to release him. And the Commanders knew at that point, were they even the Commanders? Yeah, I guess they had just become the Commanders. That he was not going to sign with them. He was going to sign with somebody else, so they traded for him. Had the last year of that contract, which paid him $28 million, which they got out of. He missed, I guess, the first half, or maybe more than the first half of last season. Winds up with the Rams, is the backup there. Obviously, nobody's going to be interested in him as a starting quarterback, so I guess he thinks with Andy Reid he can resuscitate himself and get back. Remember, Chad Henne had been the backup. And actually, the year not this past year, but the Super Bowl, first of back-to-back Super Bowls, he played a big role in that playoff game and helped to rescue them when Mahomes had sprained his ankle. So we'll see if he gets back as a starter somewhere. I would highly doubt it. He says it's a difficult transition to being a backup, wasn't ready to accept the backup role when the Chiefs tried to sign him last year. He accepted it this year only after it became obvious that he wouldn't be a starter. Yeah, what gave you a clue there, Carson? Signed a contract for 1 year and hopes it'll be able to be a starter somewhere next year. He said it's different, I'm not going to lie. I mean, he's on his way out of the league, and whereas early in his career, his mobility was a big part of his success. He's just not mobile anymore, and that's a big thing. I mean, they can get away with that because, when Chad Henne came off the bench, he wasn't mobile either, but the team around him is so good. But I don't think there's any way he can put himself in a position where some team might be interested in him as a starter. Whatever time he has left in the NFL is probably going to be as a backup, and maybe this might even be the last year, which is really a stunning development given how he came out of the box and looked so good. Anyway, we are headed for vacation time, and the Post in this travel section over the weekend had a few things, travel hacks that I would like to go over if you're interested in this kind of thing.
and this is something I do anyway. I mean, it doesn't matter if I'm on vacation. I just can't sleep late. I don't remember the last time I slept past like 7 o'clock. And one of the travel hacks that's in this story is to get up early on vacation. They say life is short, so take a cue from the dad playbook, that would be me, and seize the vacation day with an early wake-up call. For Deputy Features Editor Amanda Finnegan, rising with the sun means hours of calm before your travel partners join you, and by 10 a.m. you're ready for your first nap. I would highly recommend that. You don't have a lot of people around. If you're going to the beach or whatever, you can walk in peace and things like that. So I'm 100% in on that. Here's something else that you might consider. And married couples, sometimes they don't do these kind of things. I think it's a great idea. Take a solo trip. The secret to a happy relationship is compromise and giving your partner time to travel solo, especially if you've got a kid at home. That's the philosophy preached by writer Austin Graff, an extrovert who has learned to appreciate the benefits of going at it alone. It's easier to get into top-rated restaurants. There's time to wander, and you return to your family more thoughtful and present. I don't know if you want to eat alone at a top restaurant. I wouldn't go that far. But I think a vacation alone is a good thing. That's you kind of get in touch with yourself, hanging out with yourself. Not a bad idea. Take a buffer day. Absolutely. Says the weekend warrior routine is for people in their 20s. Once you're in your 30s, Rachel Orr writes, you know well enough to quit pushing so hard and give yourself an extra day to chill before rushing back to work. Think of it as a mini staycation at the end of your vacation. I think that is 100% correct. You see people who try to stretch their vacation time as far as they possibly can, and they'll book a flight for say 6 o'clock on Sunday night to come back from even the West Coast. And there's delays, there's weather problems, and sometimes Evan Cohen, the morning host on Sportsmanlike here on ESPN 630, he couldn't get his flight back from Florida, so he didn't make it back for his scheduled day back to work today after a mini vacation for July 4th. But you also have people who do make it back, but the flight's delayed, there's problems, whatever, and they come into work exhausted. That's no good. You want to come back from a vacation refreshed. So the buffer day, 100%. And here's something else that I don't quite understand why they threw this in. But they say cut your airport arrival dangerously close. It's not for the faint of heart, but travel writer Brad Jappy wants to waste as little of his life at the airport as possible. He says, I live about 5 miles from Los Angeles International, and if my scheduled domestic flight is at 9 a.m., I'm comfortable entering an Uber at 8:32. Wow. Besides some serious bravado, pulling this stuff requires the use of pre-check or clear, among other conditions, traveling solo, express security lanes, a familiar airport, and no check bags. See, I hate that. I would much rather, and I don't travel that much, so maybe I'm not a good example here, but if I'm flying, I'd rather be comfortably through security and sitting at the gate for as much as an hour, hour and a half, if necessary. I can read, I can eat, I got everything I need. I'm all set. I also, and this has happened too, sometimes there'll be a cancellation and you have to scramble to another gate to get booked on another flight, all that stuff. So I don't agree with that. But the getting up early, you think of, oh God, when you're in your daily routine of going to work, and no matter how early you get up, and I think this is an early rising town because of the traffic, you think, oh God, when I get on vacation, I'm going to sleep. No, you really shouldn't. You should make use of the day, stay in your sleeping routine as much as possible. And I'm talking more and more to people my age who have been retired, some of them a year, some of them less, and they all say that they can't sleep late, and that's something that gets ingrained. It's with me because I've been doing radio for so long, and most of it morning drive, that I almost find it impossible even on the weekends to sleep late. I'm usually up before 5. I'm kind of saying on the weekend. It's just kind of the way it is. It is what it is. Speaking of the way it is what it is, this blazing heat that we have, it's supposed to be 97 today. The Nats are playing at 4 o'clock this afternoon. I think that's when the heat reaches its peak. And I've been looking. They played afternoon games against the Cardinals since the Friday night game, right? So they played Saturday afternoon when it was brutally hot. They played yesterday afternoon when it was brutally hot. And they're going to play again this afternoon when it's, supposed to be 97 with humidity. I mean, it's got to be sapping these guys. It's got to be sapping their strength. And at this point, they're kind of at the crossroads. It looks like they're going to be sellers at the deadline. But having to play all this baseball in this kind of heat probably is a difficult thing for them. And we'll see how they do. But they have I think by and large have overachieved to this point. Even though they're 6 games under 500 and 5 out of the wild card, they go to New York starting tomorrow night. So they're at Milwaukee after that. So New York and Milwaukee the rest of the week. All right, that wraps it for me. Tony is coming up next, and I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.